Howdy, folks. Darren Ray Fawn So here, talking about workers' compensation, or labor and industries, as we call it here in the state of Washington. Today's topic is going to be, of course, again, politics and our revolution Bernicrats and work comp lawyers. I want to update people on the saga that I had going on with a couple of work comp lawyers who claim to be Bernicrats who seem to fail to put the minimum federal standards on the table that Senator Sanders has told us we needed since 2015 for 5 years now. And some people are familiar with our work comp fight, know that we had a worker from California, a work comp lawyer from California, recently come to our injured workers Facebook groups to basically taunt and try to trigger us. Little dogs who the fish that he throws back, because he's only in our work comp Facebook website to basically fish for the 30-party lawsuits that he can make money off of, while telling the little dogs that he can't help, that he's tossing back to the sea, the little fish. He calls us chihuahuas that are barking at the fence that nobody's ever going to hear. Why do you come to a work comp group to do that? And he's done this. This is like, I've talked to him for about a year now, because a year ago he tried to tell me, no, Darren, you don't need the minimum federal standards that Senator Sanders has told you that you need. As he says, please vote for our BERNICRAT OurRevolution candidates. One like I had here in the state of Washington in 2015 and 16 around there, named work comp lawyer, longshoreman work comp lawyer named Scott Staffney, who ran as a Bernicrat with Senator Sanders' flag and our revolution and whole Washington flying behind his head, as I cried out for him to put the minimum federal standards on the table, and even had a 45-minute call with him and his leader, Tyler Vega from OurRevolution, about the need for minimum federal standards, and that's who Tyler Vega told me I should call to get alternative solutions to the minimum federal standards Senator Sanders gave me. So there's something's not right here when we have our BERNICRAT, our revolution work comp lawyers not helping us in the first place, like Scott Staffney did here. That was not moral and that was not ethical. But that's been a few years back, and now he's changed and flying a Republican flag, so that's fine, but he's still not really a work comp applicant's attorney if you don't step up and fight for our federal issue for all the rest of the injured workers that aren't longshore workers, sir. But that aside, it's frustrating that here I'm trying to get the truth told. Well, I've had work comp lawyers who's supposed to be advocates for the injured workers in their states, and they don't want to tell the truth about a war on the rest of us or the minimum federal standards. It's very frustrating. So to update people on the saga, I want to say I'm filing suit here with this. I don't know if we can see this here. California State Bar I'm complaining to. I'm also complaining to a lot of other people, because we are not little dogs. You can't come and tell us we're chihuahuas behind a big fence that have been kicked too many times and nobody's ever going to hear us, sir. I don't care what work comp lawyer or where you're from. You don't get to go and do that to people. You don't. And see, that's where it's egregious, because this young work comp attorney has only been a work comp attorney for 2 years. Before that, for about 3 years, 4 years, he was the employer's attorney for workers' comp. So it's egregious that this man is basically still working for the employer side for the little fish he throws back, but he wants to make money off us. But when we want him to get honest about the minimum federal oversight, even Senator Sanders, Patty Murray, and Tom Perez all told us we needed in 2015, and that today, in 2020, the United States Congressional Research Service, which is a nonpartisan think tank of smart people from our senators' staff that all got together from both sides of the aisle and have told us this is what needs to be done, and we need another national workers' comp commission. Now, nobody's asking for the federal government to go and take over workers' comp. We're asking for some minimum federal standards, like we have a minimum federal wage, so that every state would have to abide by some minimum basic rules, not be able to make us compete against one another. So for the good job supposed to trickle down to us, and that never happens. It's more of a race to the bottom for labor that is getting the grand bargain eroded and robbed from us. So I'm going to keep it real short, because I wanted to make it short and sweet, but I don't see how it's ethical, moral, nor professional for this young work comp our Bernicrat lawyer, as he claims to be today, and he claims to be an applicant's attorney. He's not standing up for all of us when he tells the little fish he throws back to the feed that have to work pro se as their own lawyers, like I did for 8 years here in the state of Washington, because I couldn't get lawyers to help me out of 10 of them I asked for. No, this is wrong. and it's not ethical, and it's not moral. Now, it's okay to want to play politics, and that's fine and dandy if these work comp lawyers want to do that. But what you don't get to do is say you're an advocate for the injured workers in Washington State or California or whatever state you're from, and not stand up and fight for the minimum federal standards that our injured workers have needed since 1972, and that Willig has even told us since Willig, the National Applicant Workers Comp Association, has also told us we need these minimum federal standards, but they went silent, like Senator Sanders went silent in 2015, and have not pressed our issue as Jason Call for Congress, our BERNICRAT candidate in my area, has come out and called me unhinged, and my mental health therapist says, gee, why is a candidate calling you unhinged, a BERNICRAT candidate at that, or a Revolution candidate calling you unhinged? Well, he won't help you put the minimum federal standards on the table. That is telling me then to vote for a work comp attorney, Scott Staffney, who's a Republican. There's something rotten in Denmark here, and it needs to be looked at. And I'm sorry, this little lawyer doesn't get to go around trying to trigger us, and that's another thing. They're sending their OurRevolution injured workers to our groups. Some of them have only been hurt for like 2 years, who haven't been through the gauntlet yet, that may even be treating good at stillness at this point. To tell us not to listen to us other old dogs who's been through the gauntlet, who's trying to educate the others and get the systemic patient abuse and state codified oppression addressed. Anyways, I wanted to update people on the saga. The work comp lawyer is James Kim from what's his law firm? The People's Law Firm out of, I think, Sacramento, California. James Kim. You're not batting for us, and you do not help injured workers when you go around and try and poke at us and taunt to us and try to tell other injured workers not to tell them to hear the other victims who are crying out for the minimum federal standards. Senator Sanders said we need, as you fly his flag behind your head and say vote for Senator Sanders and our revolution candidates. Are half of them just bizmen that you're trying to slip into our Democratic Party, and are you trying to manipulate our minds? This is frustrating, and it's aggravating, and it hurts us more than you help us. And so I can understand our revolution, other injured workers and their political operatives playing these little head games like this, but work comp lawyers who claim to be advocates for us, that's not moral, it's not ethical, just like Reverend Barber is not moral or ethical when I have begged of him to stand up and fight for our minimum federal standards, as he screams louder for a Med for All only agenda that he knows excludes us in Section 801 of the Medicare for All bill. Yeah. No, our clergy, our work comp lawyers, our politicians don't want help. I did talk to Washington State Bob Hasagawa just the other day for 45 minutes about this issue, and that's why this is so frustrating for me. Washington State Bob Hasagawa talked to me for 45 minutes. We had a very beautiful conversation. I was pretty well together. I don't think I cussed too much. And he seemed to agree with me at the end of it and said, yes, we do need these minimum federal standards, and about the only thing he could do as a powerless little state lawmaker is write a letter for us, another toothless letter. But that would help, more letters. At least the United States Congress has said we've needed it, and said 39 states are following us. If we could get 1 or 2 state lawmakers to also say, yeah, we need the minimum federal standards, and maybe people might put our National Workers' Comp Commission back on the table so that smart people from both sides can get together and talk about how we can fix an inequality in our country where one man gets $750,000 for an amputated arm on the job, and another man in another state gets $35,000 for that same amputated arm. That's an inequality we need to address, not keep saying, well, we got some other issues and we got other alternatives, because I can tell you what, just getting free, quicker care doesn't resolve the compensation issues between $750,000 and $35,000 for an arm, and that's something we need to talk about and discuss. And vocational training is another issue, and it goes on and on. It isn't just medical care. And I ain't one of those who's out to burn down workers' comp or erode it or abolish it. And that's what Reform L&I here in the state of Washington, and bad faith workers' comp. That's why they're all trying to burn down our injured workers' groups, because they don't want the truth told. They want us to go on frivolous little court cases to try and take down the road to get each state declared each constitutional state by state by state. And for 50 years they manipulated with us, have us chase our tails for lawsuits that go nowhere, and that we don't win on RICO cases that even if we do get close to winning on, they settle with just a small class of those people, and it never does help the rest of us. So what we need is our lawmakers to step in from both sides with some minimum federal standards to like I've said, it's a race to the bottom for labor, and we need some help. And I'm gonna leave it at that. I want to keep this kind of short. But yeah, they're not helping us. You're harming us when we were told a solution. And so, yes, I have issues, but I'm not going to harm anybody. The ones harming the people are the ones who are the silent bullies, like David Strider, who ran for Congress. He said, I'm an injured worker, I'll help you. But yet his buddy, camping and progressive Larry Elder with the Justice Network, wanted to tell me I was an injured worker and my lawyer fucked me and you should just suck it up and move on. I'm sorry, Larry Elder. No, you don't just suck it up and move on when people are oppressing you and harming others. And when you know that, you try to get the issue addressed. What kind of human being would I be? I was my own lawyer for 8 years, and I ended up in the end being granted a pension and SSDI. Granted, they label me nuts. And it does drive you nuts, because anybody who knows that people who are forced to be their own attorneys have a fool for an attorney, because he who has a self for an attorney has a fool for a lawyer. Now, I got to ask, are my OurBerniecrats, and did Senator Sanders give us a solution to solving a war on our injured workers? Was that done intently and then go silent on it for 5 years? Is this being done intently to trigger and manipulate people? And then are we having our BERNICRAT revolution political operatives and work comp lawyers go around to groups and try and tell people to not hear us injured workers as we cry out for help at our minimum federal oversight that even Senator Sanders told us we needed in the first place? But it doesn't really matter what he said. Injured workers advocates and injured workers have tried for this since 1972 from Republican side and the Democrat side. And that's why I don't like these young people and this young work comp lawyer coming to our work comp Facebook groups where we have injured workers who've been there talking that have been through the process for 8 years, 5 years, 15 years, 20 years, some of them 25, even 30 years. Some of these people have been in this process and have been also talking together for 8 years now, as these people for the last 2 years, 3 years have stepped on the scene and tried to tell us, oh, we know what's up. And then just James Kim from California says, I'm a work comp BERNICRAT lawyer and I fight for injured workers, and you old dogs are just little chihuahuas and barking at a fence and no one's ever going to hear you. How is that man fighting for injured workers? How do you get a law degree and keep it when you seem to be intent on throwing the little fish away and not being advocates for them while you profit off the ones you can help? As the grand bargain is being robbed away and we're being robbed of our band-aids and the non-catastrophic OJIs and our nose rubbed in our shit for years if we ask for the band-aid, as our lives are destroyed in the process. No, this is something we talk about. This is something we put that national workers' compensation back on the commission, not temporary COVID-19 fixes. What about the next COVID-20 that comes along, or 21? We need to prepare for the next pandemic. And we're not going to be able to do that if we don't have some minimum federal standards, not just some temporary ones. So what we're getting from our own liberal Biden at this point is a lot of hogwash. Well, he won't put the minimum federal standards and National Workers' Compensation Commission on the table, President Biden. Ball's in your court now, sir. Are you going to do what Obama did? Say, I'm going to make a executive order and I'm going to start tracking on the job injuries? Or are you going to say, I'm going to make an executive order and have a National Workers' Comp Commission like President Nixon did in 1972, where we were given some guidelines that were just guidelines? They were not laws that states had to follow, and they're not following those guidelines, and that's why they're failing us. Now, I can give the state lawmakers in state Washington some kudos. Like the guy who I just talked about, Bob Hasagawa, and all of them, even Mike Sells. They are fighting on state level, and that's great, but the problem is we need to untie their hands from having to fight from one side or the other side. And each says the other side won't let them do it, the other side won't let them do it. We need some minimum federal oversight that will say you will go and you will do these basic guidelines. Neither one of each side gets to say, no, we don't get to do that. That's the problem here, is this is top v bottom, and Alec owns both sides. We're not getting our voices heard. We're not being represented. And clearly when we have attorneys that are work comp lawyers in Washington State and California that are claiming to be our political affiliated with OurRevolution, And then they turn around and say, oh, well, you don't need to, what Senator told you to do. Shh, you be quiet. We're trying to get Medicare for all on the table in whole Washington. And what you're talking about will sink our ship. No, your shit's sinking our shit. And you need to get our issue back on the table. This is egregious. You're working to harm us instead of heal us. And the truth's going to get told. Well, some of us little dogs, sir, are not afraid of you.